All right. So for this part 1 of Satipatthana workshops, there'll be 4 workshops. So today and then the next 3 Saturdays. Today we are starting at 12:30. So session 1 will go from 12:30 to 2:30. Then we'll take a break for about 30 minutes. And Ajahn Brahmali needs a break as well. Then Ajahn Brahm will come in at 3 o'clock to do his usual Saturday afternoon meditation. Then this will go on until maybe about 4:15, depending on what time Ajahn Brahm is done. And our workshop will resume again, so then that's the session 2, starting at 4:30. And we will go all the way until 6:30. So those are the 2 sessions for today. And then next Saturday onwards, we will go back to our original plan, which was to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then we'll finish at 2:30. So that will be for the next 3 Saturdays. Yeah. I don't think Ajahn Brahmali needs any introduction, so I'll let him start, talking about Satipatthana and...
Okay, I see. Thank you, Lehai. So, there's a bit of feedback, I think, Jake. Yeah. Okay, welcome everyone. Nice to see you here. Is this the whole group, Lehai, or is there more people registered? This is it? Yeah? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, okay. So, we're going to continue the workshops I've been doing in the past. And so this is the continuation of what we did earlier on in the year, which was we started out doing the Noble Eightfold Path. We only did the first 6 factors because it takes a long time to do this Noble Eightfold Path. And now we come to the 7th factor of that path. And that's where we're going to carry on today. And I used to have a co-presenter, but we weren't able to source any co-presenters this time, so only me, so I have to do all the talking. So it's nice to have a co-presenter. It becomes a bit more lively, perhaps, so I would have liked that, but sometimes it's just too hard, so that's why we're doing it this way, this time around. So there's going to be, as Lehar just mentioned, it's going to be 4 sessions this time around, and the 4 sessions that we're going to have this time are basically like an introduction to right mindfulness, introduction to Satipatthana. And you may wonder, why do we need an introduction for? How can we have 4 sessions just to introduce? And the answer, wow, okay, great. Gee, I'm going to, sadhu. Yeah, excellent. Yay. Okay. Because, so the idea then is to have 4 sessions now introducing Satipatthana, and then we're going to have another 4 sessions later on, date to be decided, which is actually going to be on the content of Satipatthana, how to practice it, how it is done. So you may wonder what's the reason why we're going to have all this introduction. The reason is because the topic of Satipatthana is quite a complex one, and it is one where we kind of need to lay down the ground rules before we can really talk about the practice. We need to know what is Satipatthana, what it means, what it originates from, what did the Buddha teach, what do we teach now? We need to look at all this historical context and all these kind of things. And then once we have laid down the groundwork and we have kind of an understanding broadly what Satipatthana is about, then we can focus on the actual practice and each of the 4 Satipatthanas. So these first 4 sessions are going to be about, the first one today is going to be a general introduction on Satipatthana, Satipattana's right mindfulness's place on the Buddhist path, what its function is, what it is doing on the Noble Eightfold Path. Next time we're going to look at some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings about Satipatthana. We always have a session on what we call myth-busting in the past, but I think now we just call it misconceptions or something like that. And the idea there is that there is a lot of difference in the world, various kind of opinions about what Satipatthana and right mindfulness is about, and so we need to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, or the chaff from the wheat, so that we actually get to know what did the Buddha teach and teaches. And this ties into this idea of historical inquiry, understanding kind of the evolution of the Buddhist scriptures and the evolution, in this case, of Satipatthana itself, to kind of distinguish between early Buddhism, which this is about, from later Buddhism. On the third workshop, we're going to look at samatha and vipassana, and this is obviously very much related to Satipatthana practice. We're going to look at how they relate to each other, what they mean in practice, and we're going to discuss that topic fairly exhaustively, I think, on samatha and vipassana. Maybe not exhaustively, but in a fair bit of detail anyway. And the last session, or the fourth one, is going to be an inquiry into what was probably the original Satipatthana Sutta. And this is one of those very interesting and perhaps controversial things for some people, is to understand the historical evolution of the suttas, and this sutta in particular. And one of the things I would like to show is that quite likely the Satipatthana Sutta has evolved from a much simpler sutta at the time of the Buddha to the sutta that we have today. And then try to understand what are the implications of that. What does this mean as far as practice is concerned, when we go back to what may have been the earliest version of the Satipatthana Sutta. So does that sound exciting? Or, yeah, okay, good. If it doesn't, then you are, well, that this is your chance to go. I'll just give you a kind of brief introduction so you have an opportunity if you are not excited about this. But I think it's quite exciting myself, so we'll see how things go. One of the reasons why we're going to have a whole workshop on right mindfulness, which is Satipatthana, is because this is about meditation practice. And meditation practice is obviously one of the most important aspects of the Buddhist path. And it is not only important, but it's also quite tricky to understand. Because the early parts of the path are all about ethics and morality and kindness and these kind of things. And it's quite straightforward to understand what that is about, because we can relate to that quite easily, because we know it in our own lives, what it is about. But when it comes to meditation, it's like we're going a bit outside of our normal comfort zone. We're entering new territory, territory that we have never seen before. We may never have actually had any meditations that have been very powerful or deep or anything like that. And because we have never had those things, it means that we are kind of going into territory which is outside of what we normally experience as human beings. This is why meditations, deep meditations, are kind of they are parallel to the Dhammaloka, the world of the divine beings. The deeper your meditation, the more similar it is to kind of these existences and very high levels of the Dhammaloka and the divine beings. So because it is beyond our ordinary experience, that's why it is so important to explain it in a way that people can relate to, and to give a broad and in-depth explanation to make it likely that people will not misunderstand what is going on here. So this is one of the reasons why it becomes important, not because it is actually more important than any of the other factors. All the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are equally important, but this needs explanation because it is outside of our ordinary world of experience. So this is why we're going to do so many workshops on this, 8 altogether. Maybe more, but 8 is kind of the plan. We'll see what happens. And then comes Samadhi after that. That's when it gets really exciting. We're going to talk about some really deep stuff. Just to remind you one more time about the idea of early Buddhism, why we have this kind of sequence of talks, why they are all about early Buddhism. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, there is a distinction between the Buddhism that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago and the evolution, the Buddhism we have today, which has evolved massively over 2,500 years and become the Buddhism that we have today. They're not exactly the same. They're not very far apart either, but they're not exactly the same. Because with everything in the world, things evolve. Nothing is ever static and stable and just exactly the way it has always been. So when you hear that someone says that we are teaching the exact teaching of the Buddha, then there are good grounds to be skeptical, because no one can teach exactly what the Buddha taught, because we are all affected by 2,500 years of history here. So So why do we want to find out about early Buddhism? Why does it matter? And one of the main reasons why it matters is that the whole idea of Buddhism is that it is founded on an insight into the nature of reality. Yeah, that is what the Buddha claimed. The Buddha claimed to have discovered a very profound truth. And not just any truth, but a truth that has to do with the very meaning of life for human beings, about happiness and suffering, the distinction between the two, and how to move towards less suffering in your life, towards more contentment, satisfaction, happiness, and all of these kind of things. But it's predicated on insight into the nature of reality. And because it is based on an insight, it means that what the Buddha had to teach, that insight, that is like the gold standard for what Buddhism is about. Later generations of Buddhists, maybe they had the same insight, maybe they didn't. Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes people are very intellectual and very clever with words and all these kind of things, but maybe they didn't have that insight. So because we cannot really know with later generations, but we have to assume that the Buddha had some insight, otherwise he wouldn't be teaching. Everything in later Buddhism, if you like, it looks back to the earliest part of Buddhism. And for this reason, we need to know what the Buddha taught so we can measure everything we have today against that. And the good news is it is actually possible to essentially distinguish early Buddhism from later Buddhism. It is not that hard as it may seem. You may wonder, how can you possibly do this? And it's the way you do this is there's a number of things that you can do. One of the most interesting ones, actually I'll say the interesting one, the most interesting one last. I'll say a few other things first of all. So you have things like language. Language is a very important pointer. Language always changes. So the earliest part of Buddhism, what you will find is that it has a particular kind of language that is used. Later Buddhism has a different kind of language. That language includes things like how things are expressed, the kind of vocabulary that is used, the kind of grammar that you find in these texts, the nature of the literature. It actually just sounds differently. So the language is a very, very important pointer towards what is early and late Buddhism. And what you find is that the things we call the early Buddhist suttas, which are basically the four Nikayas, the long discourses, the middle-length discourses, the connected discourses, and the numerical discourses, if you want to know what the early text is, that's basically it. If any of you want to become a teacher here at the Buddhist Society, we have to put you through a test in the future. Are you aware of that? And one of the questions on that test is, do you know the difference between early Buddhism and late Buddhism? Okay, this is the answer, right? Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta, numerical, early discourse. If you know that, you will pass that test. So this is one of those, so I'm giving away the secrets already. That's okay. And you find this very homogeneous kind of language there. You can feel that it is language that belongs together. It's just like in English. If you read something in English and you read Charles Dickens and you compare Charles Dickens to modern English, Charles Dickens lived, 150, 180 years ago, something like that. And the language is different, right? If you go to Shakespeare, it starts to be really different. Sometimes you don't even understand what is there straight away. And if you go back to even further, you have no idea what's going on there. It just sounds like a different language altogether. So language is always evolving, and this allows us to kind of know what is there. And this may seem very specialized and difficult to do, but actually it is not. Just like you are able to tell the evolution of language by reading English literature or literature in whatever language, in the same way you can do it in Pali. Then there is the ideas that are expressed. The ideas also evolve over time. So the ideas in the suttas are of a certain kind. In later time, you have philosophy arising, the Abhidhamma, these things, and new ideas are introduced. And you can tell the age of the literature by the kind of ideas that you find in that literature. This is another way of looking at this. So these are two of the main ways. But one of the very interesting ways that is we use a lot these days, those who are interested in this kind of inquiry, is we look at what is called comparative study of the suttas. And this is the idea that the suttas exist in a large number of languages. languages that emerged soon after the time of the Buddha, or Buddhism was translated into these various languages, and then Buddhism spread out into the world, and the Buddhist suttas were kept in different places. Some of the most important suttas were kept in Sri Lanka, in the Pali language. Other suttas went to China. They were eventually translated into ancient Chinese, and they were kept in China. Some of the suttas later on were kept in Tibetan language, even though that's quite a bit later. And then we have small amounts of suttas kept in a large variety of languages, Sanskrit being one, Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit another, various kind of Prakrits. These are various kind of Indian languages, vernacular languages. Then you have Central European languages, which are kind of like Uyghur. Uyghur is the language used by the people in Eastern China today. You have many other languages. I'm not going to kind of mention any more names because I'm not sure it's going to get us anywhere. So you compare these suttas, and of course those suttas that are in common between all of these languages, they are the suttas that are more likely to be ancient, simply because they are in common. They must have had a common source originally, and this is one of the beautiful ways of deciding on this. Anyway, that's just the idea of early Buddhism, and now we're going to look at right mindfulness from that point of view of early Buddhism. And this is in large part what then trying to find out what the Satipatthana Sutta is all about, trying to reconstruct that really is comes from that kind of comparative study. I'm going to be leaning quite heavily on a work written by Bhante Sujata, who you may know. He wrote a book many years ago called The History of Mindfulness. Have any of you read The History of Mindfulness? When I met the G? Anyone else? Okay, it's a bit daunting, so you may kind of, either you fall asleep or you scratch your head if you start reading it. But it is a very interesting work. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but it's very interesting because it's quite revolutionary and comes to some very interesting conclusions. So I will be, especially the fourth session, will be largely based on his findings. Anyway, so let's move forward. Not sure if this is forward, but anyway, we'll just... Okay, so right mindfulness in early Buddhism, okay? Ding. Okay. So this is one of the reasons we want to talk about right mindfulness. The Pali word is samma sati. Samma sati. I know that people often like to have the Pali words when we do this, and especially those people with, I think, people with a Sri Lankan background, they like to have the Pali because they're quite used to that, which is very, very nice. So this is all about meditation practice, and so this is why it is so interesting, I think, because this is one of the things that we're trying to do on this path. So we're going to try to analyze and look at what meditation is about from this particular point of view. So this is what we're trying to achieve during this course, what we're aiming for, what we are kind of hoping to arrive at. So we want to understand the place of meditation on the Buddhist path, practice. And this is very important because when you understand the place of something, you understand also better what that thing is about. Once you understand the context, once you understand the kind of causal structure or whatever around this, you can actually understand what more about meditation. The place is very, very important. Now, one of the important things here straight away is that meditation is only one aspect. You can't really say it is the most important aspect or whatever. It's only one aspect of Buddhist practice. And these other factors are equally important. So you have to see, and once you understand all of these factors together, that is when you can start to understand what is going on. And just maybe I should say this straight away, the place of meditation on the Buddhist path is basically that it is about the purification of the mind. So you start off by purifying the mind through conduct, then through meditation, and then eventually that comes to samadhi through the stillness of the mind afterwards. I'll talk much more about that later on. We need to understand how meditation works. Yeah? If you understand how it works, you have a beautiful map to guide you as you do your meditation. You will find out whether you are actually heading in the right direction or not, whether the meditation is working for you or whether you are going nuts or whatever. So you have some idea. Some people do not enjoy meditation, yeah, and that's fine, but you need to know whether what you are doing actually works or not. And how it works, well, basically the answer is that it works. It's supposed to, by focusing on an object, yeah, it's supposed to make the mind peaceful, and it's supposed to give rise to joy. That's really what meditation is about. Meditation is a very, very simple thing here, but you still need to know the basic ideas about what it is about. And the last one is to understand how meditation is done. And this is particularly interesting because you will often find that when it comes to Satipatthana practice, and Sammasati really is the same as Satipatthana. I will discuss this word. If you haven't heard the word Satipatthana before, I will discuss this in much more detail later on. But there is so much different ideas about how this kind of meditation is done. So we want to kind of come back to the early suttas. What does the Buddha have to say about this? Are the contemporary meditation techniques that are called Satipatthana, how reliable are they? Do they really match what we find in the suttas or not? Yeah? How does the Buddha really explain Satipatthana meditation? And I will give you the answer straight away, because we need the answer in the beginning, and I will repeat the answer at the end. Yeah? So I'll give you the answer straight away. And the most obvious way that the Buddha teaches Satipatthana meditation is very simple. It's called mindfulness of breathing here. Yeah? Anapana sati. This is the basic way to teach Satipatthana. And I don't know if that comes as a surprise to you. Many people would say that is kind of not how it is often taught. Yeah, it is taught in many, many different ways. But I argue, and I think there's a lot of evidence for that in the suttas, that the main way of practicing Satipatthana may not be the only way, there may be other acceptable ways, but the main way, the way that actually is perfectly in line with how the Buddha teaches in the suttas, is Anapanasati. That's all you have to do to fulfill Satipatthana practice. Okay, so that is this is just kind of giving you a preview of what we're going to look at and the conclusion I intend to arrive at. I already know my conclusions beforehand. That's how you do good science, know where you want to go, and then make up the data afterwards. No, that's not really true. I'm actually basing myself on the content of the suttas. So let's, what's coming next now? I can't remember. The sequence of the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, so I just want to quickly go through the sequence of the Noble Eightfold Path again. And the first thing to know about the sequence of the Noble Eightfold Path, N8P is short for Noble Eightfold Path. One of the most important things to know about this is that it is a conditioned sequence. Each factor leads on to the next one. It is not just 8 factors that are kind of put together randomly. Yeah, actually they work in a certain order. And if you haven't got that order right, then it doesn't really work. So it has to have this particular sequence, one thing causing the next one, not just 8 random factors. So briefly, start over with right view, samma ditti. So this is you have to have right view to even want to practice spiritual life. Yeah, if your view is that killing is good and doing bad things is good, then you have wrong view, and you're not going to be interested in the spiritual path. To be interested in the spiritual life, you have to have some degree of right view that allows you to do that. It's obvious. Yeah, it's just. And of course, once you have that right view, then your mind starts to incline in a certain direction. Incline towards the spiritual practice, incline towards kindness, inclining towards morality, and all of these kind of things. Samma sankappa, right aim, or right purpose, or right intention, or right thought, or right motivation, Ajahn Brahmali likes to call it. But I like right aim myself. Once you have the view is right, you start to aim in the right direction. It kind of fits nicely together. Once you're aiming in the right direction, you start to become moral, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Right livelihood. Does anyone here have wrong livelihood? No? Just asking, just checking. It's wrong livelihood just means that you're doing things which is detrimental to beings. That's all the morality things, We discussed that in quite a bit of detail last time. Then you have right effort. So once you are moral in the ordinary sense of the word, through speech and action, etc., then comes the morality of the mind, And the right effort is in large part about the morality of the mind, how to purify your mind, how to think in a way that aligns with Dhamma, so that your mind is kind of leaning in the right direction. You have a sense of compassion, kindness, and all of these kind of things to the world around you. So now you're getting a very deep degree of purity. And then once you have that deep degree of purity, and this is where we ended up the last workshop, then only with that depth of purity is it really possible to meditate. Cannot really meditate if the mind is too defiled, because the mind is all over the place. So this is where meditation comes in. Right meditation, samma sati. I had right mindfulness before, now I have right meditation. Okay, anyway, these are just different ways of. I'm not sure why I did that. It was just random stuff. I wasn't very consistent here. And then, when you meditate, what happens is that you get the results of meditation. And the results of meditation, when the meditation works well, is called samadhi, stillness of the mind. Pure, beautiful, powerful stillness of the mind, full of joy and happiness and all of these marvelous qualities of the mind. That is the very last factor. So there you are, the sequence of the Noble Eightfold Path. And now we're going to focus on the seventh of these factors. And I just want to kind of give you a preview right there of what is very interesting about this, what is very fascinating about this, is that one of the things that you will see here is that the cause of meditation is right effort. Right effort is an act, is a part of morality. So if you want your meditation to be successful, you have to have your morality in order. This is the cause, this is the condition that allows meditation to be possible. And this may not sound maybe to you this sounds kind of, yes, okay, why is it going on about this? It's bleeding obvious, isn't it? Maybe that's what you think, But actually it's not that bleeding obvious. And in the large parts of the Buddhist world, the idea is that, well, if you are mindful, that is how you develop mindfulness. Through acting in a mindful way, you become more mindful. This is like building up a muscle. If you just try hard enough, eventually you'll become mindful. But actually you don't find that idea in the suttas. The Buddha never says that. And the reason is because it doesn't matter if you try to be mindful. The point is, as long as you have defilements in the mind, those defilements, by their very nature, will take you out of the present. That's what defilements do. So it is not by being mindful that you become more mindful. It is by being moral that you become more mindful. It is not by trying to drink your coffee mindfully. Okay, slowly. No, I shouldn't make fun of anyone. Tasting. It is not by acting mindfully, by forcing yourself to be mindful, that you become more mindful. This here is telling you right away. It is morality. It is the purity of your mind that causes mindfulness. That's incredibly interesting. I think incredibly important, because it tells you a lot about what we need to do to make meditation work. This is kind of one of the cruxes of the matter. And you will know straight away if your meditation is not working properly, if you're having problems with watching the breath or whatever it is, well, here is the solution to the problem. Don't just try harder to be mindful. It is not really going to work. That's not what the Suta is talking about. There's not something else which is the problem. It has something to do with ethics. And of course, the ethics here is a very profound thing and very difficult to practice fully. And this is why meditation doesn't always work. Anyway, this is just supposed to be a preview, so I better stop there. The other thing which is very, very fascinating here is that meditation, what does it lead to? Yeah, we're talking about samma sati here, satipatthana. Where does it lead to? It leads to stillness, it leads to samadhi. The purpose of meditation, the purpose of satipatthana, yeah, this is kind of the critical thing here, is to lead to stillness of the mind, to lead to samadhi. Again, this is very interesting because usually, very often we think about Satipatthana as being an insight meditation. It's supposed to lead to insight, as an insight practice. But in the suttas, no, it always says the purpose of Satipatthana is to lead to samadhi. So very, very important. So what does that mean in practice? Does it mean that Satipatthana is all about calming the mind? Is it samatha practice, that it has been mislabeled for millennia or centuries as vipassana, when actually it is about samatha? No, it doesn't actually mean that either. And it actually means something else. But what it means, it should move towards samadhi. That's what it means. I won't say too much about that now, because otherwise there won't be anything else to say for the rest of the course, so I better stop somewhere. So there you are. That's just a brief introduction for you. One of the things that we would like to do is to have breaks, many, many breaks. So we're going to have a break now, do 5 minutes of meditation practice. And then after the meditation, I will open up for you to ask some questions, and then we will carry on later on. So let's just chill for a few minutes. Okay, any questions or comments on what we have done so far? Yeah. Yes, please.
There's been a lot of articles in the last 2 years.
You want to speak into the microphone, Venerable? Because it might go online. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of articles. There's been a lot of articles in the last 2 years on mindfulness, and some critiques saying, that's not enough. People think just a one-fold path will do it. Could you say what your take is on mindfulness in relation to meditation?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think this is one of the weaknesses of the kind of modern mindfulness movement that we see around the world, is that it is very kind of focused on one factor of the Buddhist path. And in part, this is because they made a conscious decision at the very early on in that movement to make it unreligious, to make it non-Buddhist, and just make it secularize it completely and not to use Buddhist vocabulary or whatever. It was John Kabat-Zinn, the American man who actually started this, American doctor, whatever it is. And once you have decontextualized it from the Buddhist, you have unmoored it from the Buddhist perspective, then you lose the context. And that context, as you say, is quite different. The context is the Noble Eightfold Path. That's what the context for this is. And then you lose the importance of the other factors. There's a whole spiritual path here, and that is a very big problem. And it means that your ability to practice sati is going to be very limited. Your mindfulness is going to be very limited because you haven't got the support that makes mindfulness possible. So I think it is deeply problematic. And I would argue, if you are going to choose whether you should practice mindfulness or you should choose ethics, if you have to choose one, of course we don't have to in practice, but if you have to choose one, you should always choose ethics, because ethics is the foundation for everything else. It will actually give you some kind of result, but mindfulness out of context may not give you any result at all. In fact, it may give rise to trauma because you're not ready for it. So it may be very, very problematic. So yes, I think that is one of the big problems with some of that movement. I think they are maybe changing now. I think they're kind of recognizing the limits of their approach. Hopefully, at least some of them are, and see what happens. Anyone else want to like to say anything? Comment? Everyone is okay? Everyone happy? Okay, good. I took.
Is that planning to read for you?
Okay.
I think this is
Not working. Okay. So a couple of questions from outside of Dhammaloka. From Sanket Kanekar. Does this talk have question answer session at end? Yes, that was an easy one. We're actually having it right now, so that's good. I want to know, where has the Lord Buddha gone? I.e., where is the Lord Buddha now? I see. I think we should try to stick to the topic at hand, otherwise we're going to be here a long time if we're going to kind of open up for any question. But the Lord Buddha is no longer here. He's dead. He's gone. Parinibbana literally means extinguishment. And where does the flame go when the flame is extinguished? That's the same kind of question. When the flame is extinguished, where does it go? It doesn't exist anymore, right? In the same way, the Buddha, once he has attained extinguishment, he is no longer there. That's the short answer to you. Okay, so please. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, my mind struggles with ethics in terms of, I find at this point in time, there's so much information available about so many things, and if I actually investigate the details of my life in terms of being a human being, so many micro decisions throughout the day that relate to ethics are questionable, are distressing, disturbing, etc. And I'm not really sure where to draw the line, how to live an ethical life when I have become more and more aware of the harm that's being done, whether it be the clothing that I wear, the products that I use at home, like everything relates to the environment, how it's affecting other beings. It's really so, and my mind gets quite, I guess it can't operate properly sometimes. I get so overwhelmed with the amount of harm that's caused just by daily life, driving a vehicle, etc., etc. You're talking about the importance of ethics. Would you please be able to offer me any guidance?
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, all of these things matter because they are about the knowledge that you have of the world, and that kind of feeds into ethics. But at the end, it is not the knowledge that is the most important thing. What is the most important thing is your intention. So you just try your best. That's kind of the idea here. And you look at your intention, and that intention is what really, in the end, what matters. So it's like for example, I know that if tomorrow I will be driving back to the monastery again, and I know that I will be killing animals by driving that to the monastery. Ideally, maybe I shouldn't be driving. Maybe I should, I don't know, maybe walk. But even then, you kill. Maybe I should sit here, stay here. So there comes a point when you just say, okay, killing is part of being a human being. You have to kill to some extent. You have to do a certain amount of harm. And it's the same with you. The clothes that we wear, yes, they have come from maybe a source which isn't ideal, but we have to somehow live. We have to somehow function in our society. And so you look. So instead of trying to be perfect from a knowledge point of view, you know that there is harm. You just ask yourself, what is your intention in the present? What is my intention right now? Is it wholesome or bad? Do I want to? That is what you look at. And when you look at those kind of morality from that point of view, then the vast amount of purification that you require actually comes from purification of your intention. As long as your intention is good, then you will actually purify yourself to a very, very high extent, even if you still do things that are not ideal, in the sense of having knowledge about the consequences of your actions. Because there is no end to that kind of question, as you say. And there comes a point, you just have to say, enough, it's not going to get me anywhere, I just have to stop at this particular point. So you do your best, you purify your intentions, you ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to hurt somebody? Or am I doing it because it is needed or whatever? That's really the question you need to ask yourself. If you do things because you want to hurt somebody, that is where the problem is. So basically, it's not...
It's never coming from the wanting to hurt someone or hurt another being.
Yeah.
But I'm now aware of that so many actions that we take in daily life are causing harm.
So look at your intention. That simplifies things a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's carry on. So just very briefly, there's a couple of points I want to make about the Noble Eightfold Path itself before we get into the details of mindfulness. And one of the kind of strange little statements you find about the Noble Eightfold Path is that it is called the teaching and the goal. So the Noble Eightfold Path, on the one hand, is obviously it is a teaching. And the reason I'm saying this is because it actually does relate to the development of the mind. That's why I'm kind of bringing these things in here. And for that reason, also to mindfulness itself. It is the teaching because the Buddha presents 8 factors. It presents them in a certain order, having a certain consequence. Each one leading to the next one. So it is the teaching you find in the suttas. But it is also the goal in the sense that the Noble Eightfold Path is something which exists within each one of us. If you look at your mind right now, you will know to what extent the Noble Eightfold Path is developed within you. Yeah, it's a psychological state, the Noble Eightfold Path. And eventually, when you internalize this path fully, when you become a stream enterer, an Arya, a noble one, or whatever, it is as if you have internalized the Noble Eightfold Path. It becomes part of who you are. So in this sense, the Noble Eightfold Path is both the teaching out externally, coming from the Buddha originally, and also our inner state, a psychological state. And then the Buddha says that this noble path is conditioned. Yeah, that's one of the kind of interesting statements you find in this particular sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 44, the Chula Vedalla Sutta. So what does that mean, that the Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned? It's kind of an interesting thing here. Well, first of all, what it means is that all the teachings of the Buddha are conditioned in the sense that they arise because a Buddha thinks about the world in a certain way. He gives those teachings, and eventually they disappear. So in this sense, they are conditioned. But the Noble Eightfold Path is also conditioned in the sense that for the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path to arise within us as a psychology, that is obviously conditioned. Yeah, the path arises within you as a result of certain cause and conditions being there. So in this sense, also, the Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned. So the Noble Eightfold Path and the development of the mind here are basically the same thing. When we talk about meditation practice, we talk about right effort and all of these things, that conditionality, that development of the mind is the same idea that the Noble Eightfold Path here is conditioned. It's different from, for example, there are certain principles of the Buddha that are not conditioned. Yeah? For example, if you talk about dependent origination, the Buddha says dependent origination is a principle that is always there. It's niyata, it is like a law. Yeah? And because it is a law, it is a description of the world or a description of a human being, a description of reality. And because it's a description of reality, whether there's Buddhism around or not, whatever we do, it is always true. It is always the way the world operates. It operates through the sequence of dependent origination. Four Noble Truths are always true. Yeah? Impermanence, anicca, anitya, non-self, these things are descriptions of nature, and so they're always true. That's different from the Noble Eightfold Path, which is a conditioned phenomenon. And this is why it kind of stands out in this way. It's a little bit different from everything else. This then becomes part of how meditation works. It's also part of this conditioned path. Definition of Samma Sati, right mindfulness. How is it defined in the suttas? The suttas are full of definitions, full of explanations. And Samma Sati itself is defined, and this is the definition. What is right mindfulness? This is a quote from a sutta. It is when you meditate by observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware, mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. This is right mindfulness. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, the 45th Samyutta. 45 there is the chapter number, which is the Magga Samyutta, the connected discourse on the path, the 8th sutta. So this here is the standard definition of Satipatthana in the suttas. Yeah, many of you will have recognized that, I'm sure, straight away. So this is the definition, this is how Satipatthana is described. So this shows you that Satipatthana and right mindfulness are the same thing. When we talk about right mindfulness, we mean Satipatthana practice. Yeah? These are just different words for the same thing. And this is how it is described. This is the short description in the suttas. And this description here is actually very interesting. And we're going to analyze this in greater detail later on. But just to give an idea of what is going on here, it is, you can see here you have this idea of observing here, which is anupassana. And anupassana means like to see along with. Yeah? So that in that sense, it is meditation practice. You are observing something, you're staying with something. And then you have the object of your observation, or the thing that, or the subject of your observation, which here is the body. And the body here is also a very interesting word because it actually means a large number of things. If we think normally we talk about the body, we talk about the physical body, in English. But actually in the Pali here, body can mean much more than that. And it opens up a quite large field of possibilities for meditation practice. And then you have the last part here, which is the idea of keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. Well, these are the mental qualities that are required for successful meditation practice. This gives you the qualities you need to establish in your mind before meditation really is possible. So a very interesting little formula for you. This is the Satipatthana formula. And Satipatthana, of course, we talk about the 4 Satipatthanas in the suttas. If you didn't know that, you know now. There's not only one, there's 4. So this is about the body, but then you have the other 3. So here you are. Here is a summary of all the 4 Satipatthanas. It's when you meditate by observing an aspect of the body, an aspect of feelings, an aspect of the mind, an aspect of mental qualities is the last one. Keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. And this is what is called Satipatthana in the suttas. So, okay. Definition of sammasati, even more, okay. So sammasati is satipatthana, and right mindfulness, and I have here translated satipatthana as the applications of mindfulness. I will go into this in much more detail very soon about how we should translate satipatthana. This is actually quite interesting, of course, because it's surprising. If you translate something wrongly, it can give you the wrong impression about what we're supposed to be doing here. But through translating something in a way which is more appropriate, it actually guides us in the right way. So translation actually matters. It can really give rise to a lot of problems if you get the translation wrong. And it's interesting. As a monk, you often discuss the suttas with all kinds of people, whether monastics or lay people. And what you find is that people will come to you and they will say, "Oh, look, but it says this here, in the suttas," and they bring you an English translation. And sometimes they forget that an English translation may not be adequate, it may not be right, may not be appropriate. And so it is not enough just to have the English translation sometimes. Sometimes you actually need to go back to the underlying Pali to be able to understand what actually is going on. So just because the English says something doesn't mean that it is kind of set in concrete once and for all, and you know what the meaning of a particular term is. But here I call it the applications of mindfulness. You apply the mindfulness in a certain way. You use the mindfulness. In other words, you have already established the mindfulness, and now you apply it in a certain area, in a certain sector, to a certain group of phenomena. And then you use that to develop your mind further. Sammasati, the applications of mindfulness. Other translations are the establishings of mindfulness, the focuses of mindfulness, etc. So that is the basic definition for you. And now I'm going to broaden out a little bit. And I'm going to look at how Satipatthana is talked about in the suttas in a very general sense. But before I do that, I want to have a look at the various texts that we have on Satipatthana. Now, usually in Buddhism, when we talk about Satipatthana, usually what people refer to is the Satipatthana Sutta. There is there's 2 suttas known as the Satipatthana Suttas, found in the Majjhima Nikaya and also one in the Digha Nikaya, the middle-length discourse and the long discourses. And this is usually what people mean by Satipatthana. But the reality is that there's a lot of suttas on Satipatthana. And this is very interesting because what it means, if you really want to understand Satipatthana properly, you cannot just read one sutta. Yeah, it's not enough, even though that's what people usually do. What you have to do is you have to understand the whole breadth of Satipatthana as it exists in the Buddhist tradition. Only then do you get a proper understanding of what it actually means. This is very important, and it's particularly important with Satipatthana because, as we shall see later on, the Satipatthana Suttas, there are certain inconsistencies within them that makes it even more important that we consult the broader material on this kind of practice. So what are the suttas that we have? Well, we have, as I just mentioned, the Satipatthana Suttas. One is found in the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, number 10, the Majjhima Nikaya. The other one is found in the Digha Nikaya, DN, the long discourse of the Buddha, number 22. And so this is kind of the what is almost always referred to when someone talks about Satipatthana practice. Why are there two suttas which are virtually identical like that? And that is a interesting question, and the answer is probably that at some point in history that sutta has been duplicated. Because the content is identical, and what is very strange is that the suttas are spoken in the same place. Did the Buddha speak the same sutta in the same place? It's a small little place. It's not like the main place of Buddhism, like Savatthi or Rajagaha or anything like that. It's a place called Kammasadhamma in the Kuru country. That's where the Satipatthana suttas are spoken. Now, both these suttas, even though they are identical in content, were spoken in this obscure place where almost no other suttas were spoken to the same kind of people. And the solution to that conundrum, which seems very strange, that the sutta probably was doubled at a certain point in time. So it was put into two different collections. And there's good reasons for thinking like that, because in some of the other Buddhist traditions, you only find one Satipatthana sutta. It's only the Pali tradition that has two of them. So it seems quite likely that in the Pali it has been duplicated. You may wonder, why is that done? Why do these things happen? And the reason why these things sometimes happen is because it goes back to the idea of the oral tradition. And when you had an oral tradition, you had people who specialized in certain suttas. So, for example, you would have a certain, these are called bhanakas. Bhanakas are reciters. And the bhanakas would specialize. One bhanaka would specialize in the long suttas, one bhanaka in the middle-length suttas, one bhanaka in the connected suttas. But everybody wanted a full curriculum. Everyone wanted to kind of know the basic ideas of Buddhism. So if a certain collection lacked something about Satipatthana, well, then you would add some material on Satipatthana to that collection to make it more complete. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes you have duplication of suttas like this. So it's not really strange, and the historical context suggests that this actually is what happened. Now, these two suttas, what is very interesting about these two suttas is that they, depending on which tradition, even within Theravada tradition, depending on which one you use, they are actually different. So in the longest one here is found in the Digha Nikaya 22. That's called the Maha Satipatthana Sutta. Maha means large. So it's a large Satipatthana Sutta. So that is the same length across all Theravada Buddhism, whether you go to Burmese Theravada Buddhism, whether you go to Sri Lankan Theravada Buddhism, you go to Thai Theravada Buddhism, all of these different areas have exactly the same sutta, Maha Satipatthana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya. It's a very, very long sutta, lots of extra material in there. When you go to the other one, Majjhima Nikaya 10, and you compare in the different versions of the sutta, Sri Lankan version compared to Burmese version, they're actually different. And the difference is that in the Burmese version of Majjhima number 10 is exactly the same as Digha Nikaya 22, whereas the version in Sri Lanka, the version in Thailand, Majjhima 10 is a lot shorter than Digha Nikaya 22. And so this is kind of interesting. How does these things happen? And the reason what has happened there is that at some point in Buddhist history, within the Burmese tradition, they have decided to add the long extra section in Digha Nikaya 22, take that from there and add it to Majjhima Nikaya number 10, and then they have changed the name of the sutta from Satipatthana Sutta to Maha Satipatthana Sutta. So in the Burmese tradition, both suttas are called Maha Satipatthana Sutta, the great discourse of Satipatthana, whereas in whereas in others it is just Satipatthana and Maha Satipatthana Sutta. So what we are seeing there, and this is actually very fascinating, because what we are seeing here, we're seeing almost a live, contemporary example of how the suttas get expanded, how they kind of change over time. And this kind of proves the point that throughout Buddhist history, there has been changes to the suttas. Additions have been made, because this must have happened fairly recently after the kind of Burmese tradition went its own way and did its own thing here. And they added this enormous extra section to Majjhima Nikaya 10, coming from Digha Nikaya 22. So it proves the point, that when we say that the suttas are not unadulterated, that they have been expanded, been added to over the centuries, we are on very firm ground, because it's happening in the present day, right here and now. So this is kind of part of the evidence for this whole way that we deal with the suttas here, looking at the original sutta and compare it to contemporary versions. I'm not sure if that made any sense to you, but if it didn't, you be free to ask questions in a second. I'll just go a little bit further. So these are the Satipatthana Suttas. Then there is much, much more material on Satipatthana in the suttas. The next one is called the Satipatthana Sangyutta, and this is a whole chapter in the connected discourses of the Buddha, and there's about almost 50 suttas on Satipatthana. So there's a lot of material, 50 extra suttas, each one being in many ways very interesting in its own right, which adds to our understanding of what Satipatthana is about. And it would be mad if we tried to understand Satipatthana without taking these suttas into account. You can argue that the bulk of the suttas on Satipatthana actually are found in the Satipatthana Sangyutta. And I spoke to someone just recently. They said, wow, it was so interesting to read the Satipatthana Sangyutta, because so much interesting information there. And that's exactly right. There's a lot of interesting information in there about nice similes, nice metaphors, nice ways of dealing with the Satipatthana, which you lose unless you actually read these suttas as well. So please have a look at this. I think you will find it very fascinating. There's nothing very complex or difficult there. Most of it is fairly straightforward. Of course, fully understanding it is always difficult, but at least getting an immediate view is not that hard. So check out the Satipatthana Sangyutta. Then there are also a number of other suttas. You find kind of odd suttas here and there. You find suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. And there's a few in there which are unique, and I will be quoting some of those later on. There's also an additional sutta in the long discourses, which is interesting. So you really need to kind of have an overview over all the suttas to fully understand what is going on here. Then we come to Satipatthana in the Abhidhamma. I don't know, maybe you think I'm joking, but I'm not joking. And because usually I say, well, the Abhidhamma is later than the suttas, so forget about the Abhidhamma. And now I quote the Abhidhamma. So what I'm being a bit dodgy, right? So the answer to that, the reason I'm bringing in the Abhidhamma here is that the Abhidhamma is a very complex kind of piece of work that was evolved and developed over many, many centuries. But what is interesting about the Abhidhamma is that there are aspects of the Abhidhamma that are common to the different schools of Buddhism. And those aspects that are common to the different schools of Buddhism obviously are quite ancient. So you have to distinguish the various parts of the Abhidhamma. And the most ancient part of the Abhidhamma is a text called the Vibhanga, one of the texts of the second text of the Abhidhamma. And part of that is what is called the Sutanta Bhajaniya. Sutanta Bhajaniya means the analysis according to the suttas. And it is very similar to the suttas. It almost uses the words of the suttas and puts them in a slightly different context, but they're essentially the same as the suttas. So sometimes, you may find, for example, in the case of the Satipatthana Sutta, you may find a sutta which has developed a long time after the Buddha. In those cases, it is possible that an earlier version has been kept in the Abhidhamma, because the Abhidhamma may have been, at least that part of the Abhidhamma may have then been completed before. The suttas which were added to long time afterwards may have been going later on. So for that reason, sometimes it can be useful to go to the Abhidhamma because it may actually have some content that is more original than what you can find in the suttas. And very interesting, in the case of Satipatthana, it's probably one of the few cases where the Abhidhamma seems to have kept something which is earlier than what you find in the Satipatthana Samyutta. It is very rare, but this seems to be one of those few cases. And there are various versions of this Abhidhamma. There is the Abhidhamma of the Sarvastivadin school, what is that text called again now? Dharmaskanda. Dharmaskanda is a text which is very in parallel to the Vibhanga, and you compare them. It's very interesting because you see certain similarities between the Abhidhamma of the various schools. And you have the Abhidhamma of the Dharmaguptaka school, and this particular text is called the Sariputra Abhidharma or something like that. Is that right? I think so. That's what it's called. Again, this again is a text which has a lot in parallel with the Buddhist Abhidhamma. So we see certain core elements, and that's why I want to bring this into this discussion as well. And then we have the last one, which is Satipatthana outside of the Pali tradition. And this is where we use the suttas that are found in other schools of Buddhism, especially Dharmaguptaka and Sarvastivada, because these are the schools we have most texts from. And these are usually found in Chinese translation and also some other minor languages. And all of these things need to be taken into account if we are going to fully understand the Satipatthana. So now you can see, what you're starting to see here is that the approach that you use if you want to have a full understanding of what Satipatthana is like, this kind of approach that I'm using here is very different from the traditional approach that you find in normal Theravada circles. Normal Theravada circles, you say Satipatthana Sutta is kind of, that's it, and you stay with that. And this approach here broadens out, and it looks at Satipatthana from almost any conceivable angle, taking in all the information that we have in the contemporary world. And we have much more information now available to us than we had even 50 years ago, because of all the discovery, understanding of the parallels in various countries. And once we have that information, once we have that understanding, we need to take that into account to be able to fully understand what this is about. So this gives you an idea of why what I'm going to present here actually is quite different from what you normally hear about Satipatthana practice. Let's have another break and just do a little bit of meditation together here. Okay, any questions or comments so far?
So if anyone has any questions, yeah, okay. While you're walking, I will read one question from here. So Ajahn, we've got 3 questions from online. So the first one from this person who calls herself or himself Do It Right. The question is, does mindfulness encompass insight or just samatha? It's about vipassana
Okay.
samatha.
Yeah, so we're going to look at this in much more detail later on, but mindfulness itself is neither insight nor samatha nor insight. Mindfulness just means that we'll actually look at the meaning of mindfulness later on, but basically it means something like awareness, and actually broader than that. But if we use the mindfulness properly, then it leads to samatha and vipassana. It leads to calm and insight, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, maybe we have the live question.
Yes. Yeah.
Was not Buddhist, was more Catholic. So my question is how view and the mindfulness refine each other together, and then you get the samadhi and insight. So is it just a flow, like the morality part you have in many religions, the right livelihood and so on. So that's, you're born with those kind of ethics and you practice it in the society. But I'm just more interested in the Buddhist view and how that informs the mindfulness and the samadhi.
Yeah. So it informs in a number of ways, actually. It's a very large topic, but in fact, it actually says in one of the sutras I will have a look at later on, it actually says that mindfulness or Satipatthana should be founded on 2 things: view, right view, and sila and morality. And the way that it works with right view, the way that actually kind of founds the whole thing, there's many ways to look at it. You can look at it in terms of rebirth and karma if you want. That also helps you to practice. But more importantly, I think, is the understanding of where real happiness is to be found. Understanding the downsides of ordinary sensory existence. To understand that there is a higher level or a higher consciousness that you can actually aspire for and achieve through meditation practice. So it is actually just contemplating nature according to the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha will tell you everything is impermanent. You're going to die. All relationships have to come to an end. Everything is, the sensory realm is very problematic. But you can elevate yourself above that sensory realm through meditation practice. And you start to get that when you start to meditate and you start to see how you can calm down, how it is achievable, or how all these things are at least in part achievable. You start to reinforce that view through your own experiences. So this is one important way, whereby you actually achieve that. And the ideas of rebirth and karma also matter, but in a slightly more roundabout fashion. The fact that if you are reborn, well, you want to develop a mind which is positive in the future, etc., etc. So all of these things come into that. I think we discussed that a little bit last time as well. I think maybe. So maybe if you want to check out what we did last time. Yes, Ananda. You're here. Okay, welcome. Okay. Yeah.
Only 10 minutes late.
Only 10 minutes yet. Okay, that's good enough. That's better than 0 minutes. Yep.
Thanks. Ajahn,
you have a question only after 10 minutes. That's pretty impressive.
yeah. And just going back on this, the type of suttas.
Yeah.
In SN 47, thanks for putting us on to this SN 47, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because relatively, the Samyukta Sutta very much shorter than the MN 10 or DN 16. Much shorter. Most of the SN in volume size, they are shorter. So would it be right then to say that they are without any additions, peripheral additions from subsequent times? So therefore they are more of true Buddha teachings?
Quite likely, because they are very short, and it's actually much more difficult to add to them. yeah, because of their shortness. And whether it's possible to add it to a sutta depends on the structure of the sutta. Some suttas are constructed in such a way it's very easy to add new elements because it's almost like a kind of template, and you can kind of put little bits and pieces in there. And the Satipatthana Sutta is that kind of sutta. And there are other suttas also, but other suttas are very structured in a sense. And when there is a very clear structure, and one thing leading to the next one, it's actually difficult to add anything because it doesn't really fit in there. But when you have a series of exercises, just add another exercise, doesn't make any difference. It's kind of still. So I would say that's true. And some people have speculated that the Satipatthana Suttas may originally have been part of the Satipatthana Samyutta. Yeah, but so it looks a bit like what you might call a Vibhanga Sutta. Vibhanga means analysis. And very often what you find in the sutta is that you often have pairs of suttas. One is called Udesa, it's called Udesa and Vibhanga. And Udesa is like a summary or a short version. Vibhanga is like a long analysis. So the Satipatthana Sutta looks a bit like an analysis of what is originally a short statement about Satipatthana. And then maybe it was moved into the Majjhima, and then it was, all kind of things happened there.
And especially in SN 47, those shorter suttas, some of the similes are very punchy, like in that Makkata monkey one, and the Sakunag one, that owl one, in this 47. Those similes are really drawing the point to the heart. So, but I mean 10 even, though it is shorter than DN16, void of any similes like that.
Or they're not.
I'm saying not
entirely
void,
but almost void.
Almost void. So therefore, SN 47 probably suttas are more of Buddha's.
You're right. I love the similes. The similes are kind of what brings the Dhamma alive in many ways. The similes are just great. It's like Ajahn Brahm says. That's why I think one of the reasons Ajahn Brahm tells so many stories, because people remember stories. And whereas kind of dry intellectual content is often very hard to remember. So these things bring Satipatthana alive, and absolutely. So yeah. Yes.
There are two more questions.
Yeah, please.
Do you want to take a sip of your coffee?
Absolutely. I'll drink while you ask the question.
Okay. So second question online is from Robin Godwin. She asks, you said something like, if you focus on mindfulness before you are ready, then it can lead to trauma. Can you explain a little bit further?
Well, I'm just really referring to some research that has been done in, because these days a lot of research within mindfulness, because it is so popular around the world in all kind of contexts. And some of that research has found that some people, they don't take well to mindfulness meditation, and they actually have negative experiences where they feel anxious or traumatized, or they feel actually it's really difficult, maybe because they are not really ready. Maybe the mind isn't, mind isn't in a state whereby being mindful is really possible. And in those situations, you should start with the earlier aspects of the path rather than start with mindfulness, and purify those first, and hopefully then you may come down the track, you may be able to meditate. Or maybe you need to go to a counselor. Maybe you have some trauma in your life that blocks you. Many people have had difficulties in life, and sometimes those difficulties may stop your mind from really being able to focus, because the trauma lingering in the background, blocking you from having access to the kind of proper stillness and proper mindfulness. So everyone needs to be very careful, and I think it's important to take charge of your own meditation, your own mindfulness. Take charge of your own spiritual practice, not rely on a teacher that tells you do this. This is one of the worst kind of teachings, when you're told, practice in this way regardless of what happens. And unfortunately, this is quite common in meditation circles. Just do this. But it's not working. But continue, continue watching and see what happens. And if you keep on doing that too much, you may actually end up going funny. And it's not a laughing matter to go funny, So and this is what happens, if you do go too far with this kind of thing. So very important to take charge of your meditation practice and know when to stop and know when to go right. Otherwise, it can actually go wrong. Quite common, not uncommon anyway, for people to go on meditation retreats and sometimes people go psychotic, and very often it's because the instructions aren't all that great. I wouldn't say it's common, but it happens in a small number of people who go on these very intensive meditation retreats.
Okay, Ajahn, I'll ask one last question. I'll let you continue with the class. So the next question is from Wei Chuang Ang. Asks, if Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned, does that mean that Buddhas of the past might not taught the path using the framework of Noble Eightfold Path?
That is an interesting question, because I think that there's probably many different ways that it's possible to frame the Dhamma. You can teach the Dhamma in many different ways. I think the answer is probably maybe not. Maybe they taught the path in a slightly different way. But the point really is that even though it is framed in a different way, using different vocabulary, it will still have the same content. Yeah, the ideas that are explained, the underlying ideas, will still be the same. You still have to purify your mind. You still have to have a right view. You still have to meditate. But exactly how you phrase those things, they can be phrased in different ways. And that's why in the suttas you have things like the Eightfold Path, you have the 5 powers, the 5 spiritual faculties, the different ways of talking about the path. But the way of purification is going to be the same, but how it is expressed might be slightly different. So maybe, but I don't think it makes that. It doesn't make a great difference, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah? Everyone okay? Okay, so let's carry on. Next one, look at, this is just a sutta talks a little bit about Satipatthana. I just put it in there because I thought it was kind of nice. Yeah? So I will just read it out for you. Whoa, so a lot of text, so don't worry too much. I'll just read it. And so this is what this is from the Buddha, this is what he says. Suppose I had 4 disciples with a lifespan of 100 years, and they each were perfect in memory, range, retention, and had perfect lucidity of wisdom. They would ask questions about the 4 applications of mindfulness, Satipatthana, again and again, and I would answer each question. They would remember the answer and not ask the same question twice. And they would pause only to eat, drink, go to the toilet, and sleep to dispel weariness. Those 4 disciples would pass away, yet the realized one would not run out of Dhamma teachings or answers. So the idea here is that Satipatthana is quite profound in a certain way. Yeah, you can ask endless kind of questions about Satipatthana, and you can kind of delve into the details of it more and more. And there is almost no end to the questions, almost no end to the answers. And that says something about Satipatthana. It says something about what we are dealing with here. And because we are dealing with meditation practice, because we are dealing with the development of the mind is incredibly diverse. The mind has defilements of all kinds of aspects of defilements. There's all kind of different ways of developing the mind in meditation. And to be able to cover all of this development, to be able to cover properly even just the overcoming of defilements, actually, you can just carry on. Yeah, you can just talk about it, go on and go on for 100 years, as it says here. I don't know how many questions. How many questions can you ask if you ask questions continuously for 100 years? How many questions is that? A lot, isn't it? I think if you add it all up, you can kind of, it can be, you can have a lot of questions. So it's enormous amount. And if you start to look at some of the suttas that have to do with the nitty-gritty of meditation practice, for example, if you go to the Upakilesa Sutta found in the Majjhima Nikaya number 128, you start to get a feeling for the details of how to, just dealing with defilements of the mind, how detailed it is. The Upakilesa talks about 10 kinds of defilements that you can kind of, you have to counteract. And then the Buddha talks about how he counteracts these things. And it's a long, long sutta about that particular aspect of things. So this is it's a very diverse area, and one of the things that you find when you teach meditation and you teach Buddhism to people and you listen to people's questions is that the kind of different angles that people come from, when it comes to meditation, the different kind of experiences people have, and people have all kind of really wonderful and marvelous, but also strange experience in meditation practice. You start to realize the diversity of the mind and how broad this field of mental development actually is. In fact, you could argue that anything that we experience in this world, any kind of rebirth you can have, any kind of experience you can have, ultimately comes from meditation practice. It comes from the mind. The diversity of the mind is what we see in the diversity of beings, the diversity of rebirths and all of that. So everything, in a sense, is encompassed by the mind. And that's why this is so broad. But then there is another aspect to this idea of Satipatthana, and this is like a secondary aspect. And this is more like the insight aspect of Satipatthana. We have seen just before how Satipatthana leads to samadhi, how it leads to stillness. But arguably there is also a Satipatthana that goes beyond samadhi, on the other side of samadhi, and takes the kind of the path all the way to its end. And that is the inside side of things. And when you start to read the suttas, you understand that a lot of the suttas are about the deep insights to be had on the Buddhist path, the things that you do after a state of samadhi. A lot of suttas are about that, and you would expect that to be the case, because now you're entering territory which is completely outside the range of any ordinary human being. Here you're entering the terrain of the Aryas, the noble ones, things that are absolutely beyond anyone's experience. And because of that, you need to give a very large diversity of teachings to ensure that this is understood in the right way. You start to read the things like the Kanda Samyutta. If you go to the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha, the 22nd chapter is called the Kanda Samyutta. It's the connected discourses on the 5 khandas, the 5 aspects of a person. And there's about, how many suttas are there? There's a lot, 100, it must be close to 200 suttas, I think, in there, and they're all about that deeper aspect of insight into the nature of reality. Same thing with the Salayatana Samyutta, the connected discourse on the sense basis. So when you add up the complexity of developing the mind, even just to get to samadhi, and then you add to that the insights that come after samadhi, you get kind of the essence of what Buddhism is about. It's a very broad and large area, and this is why you have this, you ask questions for. So if each question takes, how long, let's say a question takes a minute, and the answer takes 9 minutes, that's 10 minutes, 6 questions per hour. No, I need a calculator, I can't do this in my head. So anyway, it's a lot. So depth of Satipatthana. Let's go on. The significance of Satipatthana, there's another nice little sutta for you. So, the ocean is full of many kinds of treasures, such as pearls, gems, beryl, conch, quartz, coral, silver, gold, rubies, and emeralds. In the same way, this teaching and training is full of many kinds of treasures. That is, the 4 applications of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of psychic power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 awakening factors, and the Noble Eightfold Path. So here, the teachings of the Buddha, that sequence at the end there, the applications of mindfulness going down to the Noble Eightfold Path. Now that set of things you find there, this is known collectively as the 37 Bodhipakkhya Dhammas, 37 aids to awakening here. And these are the things I mentioned here before. I think that these are the things that the Buddha said if anything is my teaching, this is my teaching. This is what you should remember if you want to carry the teaching on into the future in the world. This is what you need to remember as my teaching. This is what you need to teach. And this is a summary, if you like, of my teachings. So what is kind of interesting here now, you can see that it is compared to all these treasures, the treasures, the pearls, the gems. These are all the things that people think of as the most valuable things in the world. Gold and diamonds or whatever are all included as part of this. And of course here the teaching of the Buddha, if anything is valuable, this is what is really valuable in the Buddhist teaching. This is what the Buddhist teachings really are about at the end of the day, is these things. And these are gems. They are gems because in the same way as gold supposedly makes you happy, or makes you kind of your life more worthwhile, this ultimately is what really gives you access to the highest happiness and the highest kind of things. So it's kind of compared to this, all the things that we normally value in the world. There's a very nice simile which I think one of the most kind of, anyway, it's one of the many similes of the Buddha that are very powerful and beautiful. That is a simile where the Buddha compares the purification of the mind with the purification of gold. You purify gold, purification of the mind is very similar. And here, kind of this is similar right here. Because when you purify gold, you have to get rid of the defilements of the gold. Only then does the gold shine. In the same way, you get hold of the mind, you purify the mind of the defilements, and when you purify the mind of the defilements, that's when the mind shines. And when the mind shines, that is a happy mind. That is a mind you want to live with, you want to hang out with. So the teachings of the Buddha are often compared to the highest things that you can have in the kind of ordinary secular world. This is what this is pointing out here. And you will notice here that the 4 applications of mindfulness are part of this. They are part of these things. But you will also notice that they are only one part. They are not like the only part or the thing that is most distinct or the thing which is the most important in Buddhism. It is only part of this whole thing, and all of these other factors are equally important. So sometimes the claim is that the 4 applications of mindfulness, this is what ultimately the Buddha discovered. This is what Buddhism is about. But the truth is that it's the Buddha discovered the Eightfold Path, and the applications of mindfulness are only one aspect of that, and it needs to be understood in that context. Okay. This, by the way, is from the Anguttara Nikaya, from the numerical discourses. And so you find these little teachings about Satipatthana throughout the Suta. This is one example of that. Satipatthana as a refuge. And this is another kind of inspiring way of thinking about Satipatthana practice. And this particular extract you find here is actually taken really from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the great discourse on the extinguishment of the Buddha. And this is a very nice, very beautiful story about the end, the last days of the Buddha's life. And it's becoming more and more obvious that the Buddha is about to pass away. He has become very frail. His body is falling apart, and he's having a hard time to keep going. And when Venerable Ananda sees this, he's very concerned. He's worried. He goes to the Buddha and he says, Venerable Sir, what is happening? I feel like I'm a drunkard. I feel drunk. I can't see I can't keep track of the directions anymore. Why? Well, because I'm so worried about what's happening to you, Venerable Sir. And so it's a very kind of powerful point. You can see the distress. Venerable Ananda, in a sense, symbolizes the community of Buddhists around the Buddha. And you can see why they would be so concerned. This towering figure of the Buddha, the most powerful spiritual teacher in human history, is about to pass away. You can imagine what that feels like if you're part of that community. Maybe we were there, maybe some of us were there at that time. And because of that impact that event had on us, we have come back to Buddhism to try to practice it later on. And so then the Buddha, he sees that Ananda is in distress. He sees the problem. And then he says, it's beautiful teaching, and this is the part of this teaching about Satipatthana being your refuge. And this is what he says. So Ananda, be your own island, your own refuge with no other refuge. Let the teaching be your island and your refuge with no other refuge. And how does one do this? Yeah, the idea of being your own refuge, yeah, and taking, of course, not just your own, but also taking the teaching with you, the Dhamma with you, is what is, so don't rely on external things. And you can start to see why Satipatthana is the answer to this, because Satipatthana, meditation practice, is within us. And because it is within us, this is where you have the potential for taking refuge within yourself without relying on external things. It's when you meditate by observing an aspect of the body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. This is where you take Satipatthana as a refuge. So the idea here is that if you want to have some way of security from the external world, the external world always being so utterly unreliable. You never know which way it's going to turn. You never know how dramatic things are going to be. You never know what's going to happen next. And because these things are so uncertain, you have to go inwards to find a certain degree of stability. Because our inner life is where we have some degree of say. Yeah, we can guide our mind in a certain way. The external world is always going to be out of our control. But our inner life is something that we can do something about. And of course, the path of Satipatthana, when you understand this in the right way, it's a path of stillness. It's a path of joy. It's a path of insight. And all of these things are inner qualities within your mind. And that is where you need to find that refuge. Drawing away from the world outside, going within instead. This is what this is about. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 37 aids to awakening, and I want to see how Satipatthana or Samma Sati, how it relates to these 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. Yeah. So we have already had a look at them. Just very briefly have a look at the 37 again. So we have the 4 applications of mindfulness, yeah? That's 4. And the 4 right efforts, that's 8. 4 bases of spiritual power, Iddhipada, that's 12. 5 spiritual faculties, Indriya, 17. 5 spiritual powers, 22. 7 factors of awakening, 29. And the Noble Eightfold Path, 37. So these are the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. So if you put this into a tabular form, this is what it looks like. It's quite a lot, right? So these are the 37. So it's a lot, and it's kind of unstructured. So the question is there any information that we can draw from this table of 37 aids to awakening here? And one way of doing that is to kind of group them together according to categories. Yeah? Even just a cursory glance, you will see that there are certain things that kind of occur many times. Yeah? Like energy, you see that a few times there. You see stillness and mindfulness a few times. So if we try to group it, we get something like this. So what you see there is that you see the red one there. This is about the effort or energy on the Buddhist path. Effort and energy is just 2 sides of the same thing. There is a distinction between effort and energy. In fact, quite an important distinction. Maybe we can talk about that later on. But they are just different degrees, different ends of a spectrum, of putting forth effort and applying the mind in different ways. And if you count the number of red red squares there, you find that there's 8 of them, right? All about energy and effort. And then you have the green one, which is about mindfulness. And again, you see it occurs in a number of different places. So again, you have 8 times that mindfulness is mentioned. And then you have stillness. Stillness, which here represents samadhi, also found about 8 times. So 8 times 3, 24. So that's 24 out of 37. So that's a kind of a clear majority of terms. So what does that mean? And what it means is that, energy or 4-hour efforts, mindfulness and samadhi or stillness, these things are all about the development of the mind. We are using our mind. Right effort is about applying your mind in the right way. Mindfulness is about meditation practice, and samadhi is about this achievement of profound mental stillness and peace. And this gives you an idea of the emphasis on the Buddhist path. The emphasis is on mental development, one way or another, through effort, through meditation, or through samadhi. This is kind of the emphasis here. 24 out of 37 aids to awakening are about mental development. So this is the first thing that you learn. The second thing that you learn is that there is a very even balance here between these factors. Energy, mindfulness, and stillness, they're very evenly balanced with roughly 4. There's different ways you can maybe divide this up, but this is certainly one way. So these 3 all have 8, occur 8 times among these 37 factors. Yes, they're roughly evenly balanced. None of them really has any priority, and the reason is because they are part of the same process, and each link in that process of mental development is going to be equally important. In other words, you have to go through this process stage by stage in order to achieve the result that you want to achieve on this path. So mindfulness is not more important than effort. Samadhi is equally important as mindfulness. There are steps along the road, and because of that, each one is equally significant. What about the remaining factors? Can we say anything about them? And you could say that another important aspect here is what you might call the wisdom aspect. The wisdom, and then you have confidence, and you have right view, and scrutiny, and right aim. All of these are related to each other, and they have to do with the wisdom aspect. And then there is a few kind of scattered items, like have to do with morality and virtue and these kind of things. So there you are. That gives you a kind of a nice overview of these 37 and what actually gives you an idea of what the focus is in the Buddha's teachings. Very much focused on developing the mind. This is kind of what the Sutas are very much about, and this kind of becomes very clear when you see this kind of overview of the 37 aids to awakening here. Okay, so So here is another little sutta, and this is just another angle again from which to understand the idea of Satipatthana or right mindfulness. And this here it is framed in terms of what are the principles, core principles of the spiritual life and the spiritual teachings, and the Dhamma in particular. And kind of interesting. And here it is phrased in such a way as to refer to any kind of spiritual life, any kind of spiritual practice. There are certain principles that are core to any kind of real spiritual practice. This is kind of interesting here. These 4 basic principles are primordial, long-standing, traditional, and ancient. They are uncorrupted as they have been since the beginning. They're not being corrupted now, nor will they be. Sensible ascetics and Brahmins don't look down on them. What are these for? Contentment. This is the Pali for this is abhijja. Abhijja usually means desire in Pali. It's related to the very first of the 5 hindrances, kama chanda or loke abhijja. This is sometimes translated as covetousness, because you want the belongings of other. It's related to, in that sense, to maybe to jealousy and envy to some extent as well. So when you have no abhijja, it means that you're content. You understand the limits of worldly things. You understand that there are deeper principles more worthwhile than all the worldly happinesses. So you let go of the worldly things and you move in a different direction. Contentment. Goodwill. This is avyapada. Vyapada is ill will in Buddhism. It's the anger and the harshness that you may have towards other beings. And this is the opposite of that. Yeah, the idea of kindness in the world. Kindness, one of the fundamental aspects of any kind of spiritual path, where you have understanding for others, you have compassion, you understand that everyone in the world is suffering. When you see people doing stupid things, when you see people doing crazy things in the world, the only right response is to have compassion towards them, because they don't really understand what they're doing. Yeah? And this is... So remember this. The more we understand the suffering, how universal it is in the world, the easier it is to have compassion and goodwill in all kinds of contexts. Fundamental aspect of the spiritual life. Then comes right mindfulness. Yeah, what we're talking about now, the idea of using your mind in the right way in meditation, so as to move towards samadhi, right stillness being the last one. Samadhi is a fundamental aspect of the spiritual life. So these four are very closely related to each other. Yeah, they kind of go together. You can see there the first two are really about the sila, and then you have the meditation, and then you have the results of the meditation being stillness, core aspects of the spiritual path. And again, what is interesting about this is that right mindfulness is again found in a context. It doesn't stand out as the one factor which is more important than anything else. It is part of a broader context. And all of these are equally important for the spiritual path to work. All coming together. But certainly, right mindfulness is one of these basic principles of a real spiritual path. So still just looking at some of the context for Satipatthana. What comes next? Okay, so the next one we come to the meaning of Satipatthana. I think I will stop there, because now we're kind of moving into the more details. I've so far spoken mostly about the kind of broader context of this idea, and now we're getting into the nitty-gritty about what actually it means. And I'm going to, later on, this afternoon, I'm going to decompose this word and look at its, get a more precise idea of what it is referring to. And that's when we really kind of get into the details of this. We have 1 minute left. That's not much. Does anyone like to ask a 1-minute question before we... Yes, please.
So the last 4 principles, are they conditioned?
Are they conditioned? Everything is conditioned.
I mean, like you said before, in an order.
Yeah.
Like you said for the Eightfold Path.
Yeah. Yes, they're conditioned in the sense that all of these things are, in the end, they are qualities of the mind. Yeah, and any quality of the mind is going to be conditioned. There are certain things that talk about how the world operates, like dependent origination. That can also be regarded as qualities of the mind, but it's more to do with the basic principles of how rebirth happens, or how life is perpetuated into the future. So it shows you a principle how the world operates. But these here are purely mental qualities, and as such they're always going to be conditioned. Which is great news. Actually a very important point, because if something is conditioned, it means you can do something about it. It means that there is a possibility of developing these things. If something is not conditioned, then you can't, it means that it's solid, it's stuck. The way you have it now is the way it's always going to be. And this is the problem in part of the view of self. If you have a view of self, you also have this sense that you are stuck in a certain way. But the whole idea of things being conditioned means that there is potential for development. And sometimes you don't even know the bounds for that development. And this is kind of the interesting thing about this. Okay, let's take a break. And so we're going to be... Ajahn Brahmali will be in here at 3 o'clock, and he will do the meditation, and we'll come back in at 4:30. Let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Coffee, okay. Comes very handy. Yeah.
It's to be kept in the cold.
Kept in the cold? Yeah. Okay. I'll put it in the fridge, yeah, no problems. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.